Everybody listen to We're Not Wizards, because we are the best, and we're not wizards, no matter what anybody says. Goodbye.
Welcome to another episode of We're Not Wizards. My name's Richard. I'll be your host for right now, pretty much. Joining me today, he's a repeat offender because he was on a little while ago. He was on with his gang and his crew, and we had a chat, and I asked this particular person if they would like to come back on and have a chat about other things that they're doing and other things that are involved in. So back from Tomb Guardians, I've got Cass Suwinski. So hello, Cass.
Hello, Richard. Thanks for having me again.
That's all right. That's okay. I thought we should get you back on because I wasn't 100% happy with the recording from last time, and I thought it'd be a good idea to find out we didn't really get a chance to kind of like find out a little bit about yourself as well anyway. So we want to find out a little bit more about yourself. But when we talked last time, we were talking about Velras Vampires, and that campaign went on to fund, didn't it?
Yes, it funded, and it did pretty well. I was very happy with the results, and we have just ordered the manufacturing of the miniatures actually yesterday. So
right, okay.
we're moving forward, and hopefully those products will get shipped out here earlier than expected.
All right, okay. What kind of timescale are you looking at?
Well, we put on the timescale for the Velras Vampires mid-October to end of October. Mm-hmm. But if everything goes well, and we'll knock on wood that everything goes well, we're hoping to be able to ship by the end of August. So roughly a month and a half early.
Oh, that is good. That is really, really good. And everything, as I say, everything kind of went. Everything kind of went to plan. There was a bump in kind of like the Kickstarter. It went through the funding. It funded out the other side, and which is fine. But we demand. Well, the people demand to know a little bit more about your good self, because one of the things we missed out, because obviously we had Bobby on, and we had Jason on, and there was a general crowd, and there was a lot of murmuring, and there was a lot of natter, and there was a lot of laughter, but we found out kind of very, very little about kind of like your good self. And normally what we like to have when we do have people and We're Not Wizards, to have a little bit of a chat just to find out a little bit about kind of like your history, really.
No, that's great.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about kind of how you kind of got into the hobby, and how kind of like in the first place, and then we can chat about what where kind of Tomb Guardians kind of came from.
Sure. Well, I've gamed I'm a gamer, and I've gamed most of my life, going back to high school, mm-hmm. and through college, and as I became an adult, and gamed all through my adulthood, and my friends are all gamers, and I actually lean towards the historical side of gaming, the World War II and American Civil War side. Mm-hmm. And then I had children, and I have an older son. He's 12 years old, and as he's got older, he likes the Dungeons and Dragons, and I played Dungeons and Dragons my entire life.
Right, okay.
So that's essentially how it started. So we have a convention here.
Were you kind of like a tabletop? Were you kind of like a tabletop kind of, not role player, but were you into kind of like skirmish games and your army games and
Yeah,
things like that.
We played Piquet and Johnny Reb for
Mm-hmm.
Civil War, and tabletop board games, and of course, I do role play. I play Traveler and Dungeons and Dragons
Mm-hmm.
and Bushido. So in those role playing games, I've always role played, and I still do role playing with friends online.
Mm-hmm.
I have a good set of friends that live in Connecticut, and we do it once a week on Sunday night.
All right.
But
Okay.
so as my sons got older, and I play, of course, computer games and the Dungeons and Dragons online, and
Mm-hmm.
and uh, uh, Lord of the Rings we play online.
All
He's
right.
got more and more interested in the fantasy side, and since as he was growing older, I decided, you know what, I'm gonna start getting him introduced to role playing games by doing the fantasy. And it was
Yeah.
essentially
Okay.
started as a hobby. And I started painting up some fantasy miniatures and made up a real simple rule set because he was at the time only 5 years old.
Yeah.
And we as we played, the rules got more and more complicated and more intense. And then there's a local convention here in Columbus, Ohio, every year called Origins, and
Oh
it's
yeah.
actually
I've heard of
coming up.
Origins. Yeah. Yeah.
It's coming up next month. And so I started running that particular game at Origins.
Mm-hmm.
And as the years progressed and he got older, we got a bigger and bigger and bigger following until last year. My son came home and bragged to my wife how many people wanted to play and how well it went over. And my wife was the flame behind the fire and said,
All
"Well,
right. Okay. Yeah.
why don't you write your rules? Why don't you publish your rules?" And I was like, I've always thought about it, and you know what, I'm going to do it. And a little encouragement from my son, so I sat down, and that's how it started. And I decided, well, you know what, I'm going to write some rules. I'm
Uh-huh.
going to write the rules down. And I don't know, Richard, if you've ever written rules, but wow, it's quite a time-consuming, intense process to write a set of rules,
I've
and it's
written
not as easy as people think.
I've written training manuals for a bank.
Uh-huh.
So, and I've heard that that's probably easier than writing rules. Was there a particular rule set that you followed? I mean, was it a D10 kind of rule set? Was it a D6 kind of rule set? I mean, what kind of D20 rule set? I mean, what was your
Sure.
what was your kind of your rule set kind of based around? Was there any particular things that influenced it, or that you decided, right, my rules are not going to have this in it because I just don't like that part of the rule set?
That's a good question. I really like Dungeons and Dragons
Uh-huh.
as a role-playing game. But the problem with Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm sure you can attest to, that Dungeons and Dragons is very, very complicated and not an easy thing to play when you sit down with little kids or uh, young teenagers. It's hard to explain some of the rules so they grasp all the rules. So
Mm-hmm.
besides the Dungeons and Dragons, I like a rule set out there called Warlord,
All right.
and decided, you know what, I like some of the aspects of Warlord and the skirmish abilities of Warlord, and I like Dungeons and Dragons. So let's come up with my own set so I could do a dungeon crawl game that
Mm-hmm.
we could sit down and play an adventure with a group of friends in
Mm-hmm.
a 4 to 5 hour period, and then we can put it away and come back and pick it up later on, similar to Dungeons and Dragons, just not as complicated. And that's essentially how
All
it
right.
started. And
Yeah.
as the
Yeah.
years gone on, it's essentially taken its own legs. And I've one of my best friends who lives in Switzerland, his name's Rick, uh, is actually writing the rules and putting his twist into the rules so we can release it later this year. And we'll talk about that here a little bit more. But that's essentially
Mm-hmm.
how it started. So Origins and my wife getting involved, my son getting involved, and then the process of writing the rules. My wife said, "Hey, do you have miniatures that go along with your game? And I was like, no, I
Yeah.
just use what's out there. I have my own. I
Mm-hmm.
just use what's out there. And again, she's like, well, why don't you develop your own and design your own miniatures? And I was like, well, honey, do you know how much that cost?
Exactly.
And she's like,
It's
well,
the
it always boils down to cost.
It's the Boromir meme, isn't it? It's like
Exactly.
one does not simply make some miniatures.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
And I was like, it costs a lot. And she's not a gamer. Right now she'll play board games and such with the family, but she's not a role player or anything in that matter. But she's like, well, if it's a dream of yours and you want to do it, why don't you do it? So I reached out to some of my friends in the industry,
Mm-hmm.
and they got me in touch with Fortress Miniatures, Jeff and Ben. And
Mm-hmm.
Jeff and Ben, I told them what I wanted to do. Got a hold of some sculptors that I wanted to sculpt for our company if I was going to do that. And I only
Mm-hmm.
wanted the best sculptors in the world to sculpt for our company,
Mm-hmm.
and well-renowned ones. So they got me in touch with Jason Weeby and Bobby Jackson,
Yeah.
and I told them my vision. I told them what I wanted to do with our line of miniatures and the quality I wanted. As you're well aware of, Richard, and some of your audience is aware of, we only produce metal miniatures. All our miniatures are spun cast, and we offer a
Yeah.
5-year guarantee on all our miniatures. So if you break a miniature, all you got to do is mail it back to us, and we'll replace it for free.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
speaking with Bobby and Jason, they said they were aboard and agreed to sculpt for us, and that's essentially how the process started. We did dwarves and monsters last December, and we just, like I said, or we talked about earlier, we just finished the vampires
Yeah.
and monsters just here in at the end of in April.
Mm-hmm.
So since we talked last, I'm excited about this. We added another sculptor to our company, Gene Van Horn, which is another sculptor that sculpts for some of our competitors, of course, being Reaper and
Yeah.
Wizards of the Coast. But we're excited to have Gene aboard and working with us. And in our when we release our Amazon female faction here soon and our Kickstarter, he actually sculpted 4 of the female Amazons.
That's smart. You seem to have gone for as high a quality as possible, as opposed to kind of like getting stuff out the door as kind of quickly as possible. Was that a conscious decision? Do you think that there's a kind of a gap in the market for kind of like the more metal miniatures with a kind of a high quality kind of sculpt on them?
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, what you just said is exactly what I'm the niche I'm filling.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there's some companies that produce metal miniatures. Uh, One of the largest companies, of course, we know out there. Of course, Reaper. They produce metal miniatures, but they don't concentrate on that line. And there's the gap of either you produce a lot of cheap miniatures, and when you do that, you lose the quality of the miniatures. Yes, you can buy a whole bunch of figures for a couple bucks, and you get a skeleton or you get a zombie, and it looks like a skeleton or zombie, but
Yeah.
you lose the fine details on those miniatures. For myself, and this is just my personal preference, and what they do is they're awesome, and they do a great job at it. They're a bunch of great guys. But for my company, I decided I wanted to go a different route. I was going to offer a high detailed, high quality product that if somebody's going to buy my product, I wanted to put my name on it and say, hey, if you buy one of my dwarfs and you play with it for 3 or 4 years and by chance you knock it off the table and you break a sword, mail it back to me and I'll replace it. And I wanted to fill that niche with the metal miniatures. Nobody offers a warranty on any of their figures. But you know what? If it makes it somebody happy that a miniature breaks and they send it back to me and it costs me $6 or $7 to replace a miniature, so be it. I mean, if it makes them happy and they continue buying miniatures from me, and that's what it's all about. I'd rather make somebody happy and replace a $6 figure than have them all upset that they broke it.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it happens. I mean,
Oh,
people,
absolutely.
It does happen to people, and I think it's kind of like a big measure of your customer service isn't necessarily how quick you get a product out the door. The customer service is often down to, and you hear these stories all the time, and I mean, I've seen posts on Facebook of people saying that, oh, I lost this from this company, and I emailed them, I emailed them that day, and then 3 days later, I've got like a replacement part sitting in my mailbox, and, they'll go ahead and tell, they'll put a post on social media to that effect. At the same time, if you're providing bad customer service, some people, they might not mention it, but also they'll maybe not play your game again, and they'll definitely make sure that they're not buying any of your products again. But I guess the board gaming space is quite interesting, is that I don't need to go onto social media to kind of moan and complain about the service that I got. I can just be at the board game group the next week, surrounded by 7 or 8 of my friends, and be telling them, all right, well, I sent an email in to get a replacement thing, and they said, well, it'd be $10 to replace it, and it'd be another $7 to ship out to me, kind of thing. That's it. I'm not playing that game again or buying any more of their products. And these kind of things have a kind of a way of kind of spreading out there, which is never going to be good.
That's exactly right. I mean, it's about customer service, and I on my end, I've got thousands and thousands. I probably have over 10,000 miniatures in my collections between historical and fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been there, like just like you said, I've been there where I've broken something, and especially for my World War II collection, the pieces that I have that are off countries, not the primary countries like Bulgaria or Romania, and those pieces, and essentially I broke some of those pieces and I wanted to get them replaced, and they're like, well, sorry, you got to pay for it. And for myself, and I'm not saying they're bad, but for myself, I'd rather give something away that makes somebody happy than argue over a couple dollars to make them upset. And like you said, they'll then sit down with their buddies and tell them, oh, I had to pay to get it fixed, and that's just not right. Well, I mean, in today's market with the social media, Facebook, and all the different social groups that you can belong to, it doesn't take long to get a bad reputation. And I don't want that. I want us to be the company that people love because we take care of our customers. Yes, of course, it's about making money, but it's more than that. It's about making sure your customer's happy and they're happy with your products and they love your products. That's what it boils down to. And our price point, our miniatures, comparably to the Bones collections or some of the other companies out there, are not are really marginally more expensive. We're not talking about $3, $4, $5. We're talking about cents on the dollar.
So if you only, am I getting this right that you've not been going that long at all?
No,
this hasn't been your, you don't really.
Yeah,
realistically,
we started. Yeah, we started essentially last July. Last July we started, and we now have, with this last Kickstarter, over 50 miniatures in our line. We're in the process of our next Kickstarter, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. We're releasing a brand new 3D dungeon tile set for that'll be on the market, and then we have 4 other Kickstarters planned for this year for additional miniatures. So this time next year, if everything goes well and as planned, we'll have over 160 miniatures on our line in less than a year and a half worth of in business.
And obviously, you're getting them out the door as quickly as possible. So it's not a case that you're funding, and then it's going to be a year and a half or 8 months before anybody sees anything. It sounds to me that, as soon as you're funding, you're getting everything together, and it's going to be in the customer's hands, pretty quickly.
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that because that's absolutely correct. Our Valorous Vampires, like I said, I just placed the order for the production molds and the miniatures for that Kickstarter prior to the back end or the backer kit being finalized. That doesn't get finalized till this Sunday, but I already went ahead and placed that order because I want our customers and the people that buy our miniatures to have those miniatures as fast as possible, so they don't have to wait 9 months to a year. Because most of the time, that's how long it takes, and I don't want them to have to wait. I want them to have If I could get the miniatures in July or June, so be it. Let's get them to the customers and let them enjoy it, because it makes everybody happy.
Yeah, and I also noticed that Kickstarter seems to be kind of clamping down on people having multiple campaigns as well. I think Colossal Games they still seem to have several campaigns which are either they're on hold or they're suspended, I think, due to having
really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So no, I didn't know that. I didn't know they did that.
Yeah, it seems to be.
Well, I've been there. I've been one of those customers that have waited to buy something and got burnt. So it happens, but on our end, like I said, I want our customers to have the product as soon as possible.
See, from an environmental point of view, with you making the miniatures out of metal instead of plastic, does that mean there's kind of almost like a recycling kind of thing that you can take into consideration as well? Because I take it if you're less likely to have less waste during production because you're using metal, and also at the end of it, if somebody decides that they are gonna give up the hobby and then turn in the miniatures, they can get them kind of recycled as well. They're not going to a landfill where they're gonna hanging around for the next 20,000 years or whatever.
If you look at that standpoint, yes. They're metal. Our miniatures are metal. Majority of the miniature is made up of tin. I believe 98% of it's made up of tin.
Okay.
But when we spin cast, you're absolutely right. When you spin cast, the difference between metal and resin, one of the differences is when you spin cast, you can recycle the metal that you don't use that spun away and gets in the cracks. You can melt that down and reuse it. And if somebody wants to reuse the miniature and decides he doesn't want the miniature, they can melt it down or send it back to us and we can melt it down or whomever. Whereas if you do a resin or a plastic miniature, once you melt it down, you can't use that product a second time. So whatever goes to waste is to waste.
Let's talk dungeon tiles. It's a natural progression. It's a natural progression to go from bringing on your own brand of kind of dungeon tiles, but it's a fairly kind of aggressive move in terms of, because a lot of companies I know kind of wait a while until they look at terrain. Was it just part of the kind of the Tomb Guardians kind of brand to make sure if people are kind of playing the game that if they're playing within the world, it's kind of like that you're trying to have the same vision throughout all, no matter kind of what they're playing? Was that the kind of the idea behind it?
Yes and no. All our products that we produce, no matter if they're a miniature or now the train or the dungeon tiles, I wanted to produce a product that could be multi-used in any facet. So if you're playing Pathfinder, or if you're playing D&D or Call of Cthulhu or any of the other games out there, you could use our products with that. Saying that, we are releasing a game, of course, like Richard, here later this fall, which all our miniatures and all our terrain tie into when we release that particular game. So there's a purpose behind it, but just because there's a purpose behind it doesn't mean that this terrain is just focused for our game, or our miniatures are just focused for the game. No, we wanted to have a product that everybody can join, no matter what the situation is. So these particular, and I'm very very excited about the dungeon tiles that we're releasing. Ian Lovecraft is our sculptor. He just did a Kickstarter campaign just a little bit ago, the Goblin King. I don't know if you saw it on Kickstarter, and did pretty well on that. But he's a fantastic sculptor, and so I reached out to him and again talked with him, and he agreed to sculpt for us. And our dungeon that we're releasing, or the dungeon tiles we're releasing, are a 3D dungeon of a lost dwarven mine shaft, and there's essentially roughly 40 pieces to the dungeon, or to the tiles. There's 40 different tiles, and then there's special rooms that we're creating, or I'm creating, that go along with that, such as there's a crystal room that crystals light up, and they all light up in different colors, and there's a storage room, and a forge room, and a blacksmith area. So I'm very excited about the dungeon tiles, because if people role play, you can use these, and these tiles, and these tiles aren't just normal dungeon tiles. I mean, they're highly, highly detailed. And what's most exciting about the tiles is the normal tiles that are on the market right now, like Dragonlock tiles, and there's many other small companies that have tiles out there. They're all used to clip together. And using clips to clip together, they're extremely hard to get together, and they're extremely hard to get them apart. And when you do, you generally break the clips, or you break the tile itself. And what I decided, and how I decided to design our terrain, is they're all magnetically connected together, and we use the polarity of the magnets to connect the tiles together. So, like I say, my 3-year-old loves to do it. She just comes and plays with them and connects them all together. And by doing that, what I found out is, by the polarity of the magnets, there's no gaps between the tiles. So you don't have to push them together and be careful so you don't break them. The magnets pull them together, so there's no gaps between the tiles. They're very easy to get apart.
Yeah. Does it mean configuring them is kind of a lot easier as well? That if you don't like a configuration, it's not a case that you have to completely stop the game for 20 minutes or whatever while you kind of take things apart and try and put them back together. You simply kind of almost like pull it out, it'll snip out quite easily, and then you can switch it around with other tiles quite easily then.
Yeah, absolutely. You just pull it apart, and within seconds you can move another chamber. I mean, that's one of the things that I didn't like about some of our competitors, is that if you're trying to do a dungeon and you're doing it in a fog of war setting, so somebody doesn't know what's coming, it's hard to do that with some of the pieces that are out there, because you have to snap them all together and make sure they fit together so it looks right. With this, the magnets just pull it right together. I mean, there is no assembly. They just clip right, or they just clap together, and you move on. Which is pretty exciting.
How big are the individual tiles? I mean, how many figures are you looking at being able to fit on an individual tile?
Well, I did the tiles a little. The length of the tiles, I'm going to talk in inches here, are essentially generally 2 inches long or 4 inches long is the base tile and length. The width is 2.5 inches wide. So when you put two pieces wide, essentially with the walls are 5 inches wide, but there's 4 inches playing space in between the walls. If you're using a human or a dwarven figure, you could essentially put 4 figures side to side in a hallway. And I purposely did that because too many times I played many games and you can't put the bigger monsters in a hallway. I mean, you can't put an ogre or an earth elemental in a hallway because they just won't fit.
Yeah.
So that's why I did it the lengthwise. This, like I said, this particular dungeon, it's essentially a forgotten dwarven mine that you explore. They've got mine tracks, and there's cave-in pieces and corridor pieces and connector pieces that you could use your imagination on how big or how small you want. Essentially, use a dungeon. And when we release our game set, this is part of the pieces that will be used in the first release of the game for the first adventure of the game. Because this is the top. If you can picture it, these are the top levels of the dungeon, and then underneath the top levels is the dwarven dungeon itself. It's a dwarven dungeon underneath. I'm holding that particular set for the game when we release it, so people have the opportunity to get that particular dungeon also.
So, in terms of the Kickstarter, did you obviously with you being kind of successful with the first campaign, have you learned in terms of kind of like what you're going to do in terms of like the tiers and stuff like that? Are the stuff that you're kind of saying, well, this time we're not going to bother with this tier because there wasn't enough interest in it? Is it kind of helped define your strategy when you're going into this kind of like the terrain kind of Kickstarter?
Well, the terrain's a little different than miniatures. On the miniature side, we did an a la carte level, which people could pick how many miniatures they wanted to do at, I think, $7 a piece. And then we did the Valrith Vampires level, which they got all the vampires. And then we did an all-encompass level where everybody got everything in our entire catalog. So there's really only 3 levels for the miniature side. On the tile side, that's a little bit different because on the tile side, we are actually producing hard products. We're not selling digital files. So a person, when they purchases our set, they're getting actual physical products. They're not getting a digital file so they can print it themselves. So they'll be, and actually we were working on this today. There's going to be a number of different levels. Essentially, we'll just say the beginner level, which they can get X amount of tiles for a set price, and then an intermediate level, and then an all-inclusive, and then maybe a jumbo package where they get a bunch of tiles together so they can make a large dungeon. How many tiles are broken down individually? We haven't come to that number yet.
Is that going to be dependent on cost? Is that dependent on kind of like putting them together?
Well,
I guess
we don't want
to make a whole different.
But yeah, it's exactly. It's a whole different ball of wax because you're talking about terrain now and dungeon tiles, and a lot of things go into this calculation of what goes into each package because we're going to be, as a company, producing these dungeon tiles, and it goes a lot along the lines of how long does each piece take, and if a person purchases, say the first beginner level is 10 tiles, how long is that going to take to produce, and how much does each tile cost to do? Because when a person 3D prints, like I do, we do, but when you do clips are a lot cheaper than magnets because now we're putting magnets also with the tiles. So, I don't know how many tiles there'll be in each individual set, but of course we're also conscious on how much it costs because we don't want people to look at the product and say, oh my gosh, you're going to give me 50 tiles and it's going to cost me $500. And there's a company out there that does that. Actually, it's more than that. And there's a company out there that is that realm, and they do awesome at what they do. They of course, their products are all poured, but we don't want to be where it's going to cost you $10 to $13 for one particular tile. I would like to say that our tiles are going to be $4. I like that, and then when I'm talking about U.S. dollars here,
Yeah.
Which is a little different than euros. But for U.S. dollars, I'd like to keep that around $4, maybe $5 at the most, so people can afford the products. Because if they're too expensive, they're just not going to buy it. I mean, people all have, everybody has a budget. I mean, I know you do, I
Yeah.
do, and they all,
Yeah.
most of us, as we got older, we all have families. I mean, and there's a certain amount that you can contribute to a hobby. And if it's just too expensive, they're just not going to buy it. So we're very, very conscious, and I'm very conscious on how much it's going to cost. And to that matter, for the Kickstarter, the Kickstarter for the tiles, we've got a lot of stretch goals and a lot of add-ons. And I had mentioned one of them is one of the things I wanted to do is have a pretty cool room, a crystal room where the dwarves are mining crystals out of the room, and that particular room's going to light up, and the main crystals in the room are going to light up in different colors. And in the colors, as they go, and if somebody wants to play it, you could do a certain adventure or a mystery particular room. One of the pieces of the crystals actually comes out, and you can give it to the party to collect as they play the game.
Yeah, that was going to ask, are you going to be kind of having other kind of little models as well, as in terms of, chests or movable items, that can be added in?
Oh, yes. Yeah, actually, I just sent to Ian yesterday a set of 17 different accessories that I wanted to have for the particular dungeon. So people have other accessory pieces, and here I'll list some of those off as soon as I find them. We had a mine cart, a broken mine cart, some crates, barrels, mine tools, broken and unbroken, a forge with an anvil, beds, tables, let's see, a rail track stop. I call it the rail track stopper at the end of the rail track that will stop a rail cart, alarm bell with some. So there's a lot of different accessory pieces that I wanted to include so people have them as they go through and play.
Yeah, I still kind of miss the way Hero Quest used to do kind of their little kind of tables and stuff like that. And I'm sure there's been more, well-produced kind of tables since then. But you never ever forget your first kind of sorcerer's tomb or whatever.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I still have all that. I have most of that stuff.
Exactly.
And some of those things are precious to me. And when we bring them out, I tell my son, even though he's going on 13, hey, you got to be careful with that because I don't want you to break it because I can't replace it.
Exactly. It's not like they could send it back to you and you could give them a replacement kind of free of charge.
Absolutely.
Just singing the company song. When are you looking at launching the Kickstarter for that?
I like to launch it at the beginning of June, the first or second week of June at the latest. I know it will launch before Origins, which is June 12th through the 16th. So beginning of June, I'm looking to launch that. There'll be videos posted and pictures posted. I'm starting to do that now to give some people some sneak peeks. If you go to if you go to Tomb Guardians Miniatures on Facebook, or you can go to our Instagram or Twitter account and join us, you'll be able to see some of those pictures. And we sent a few to yourself also, so you get an idea what those.
They'll be in the show notes. So if you're checking the show notes just now, there should be a huge, beautiful picture in the banner art. And there also should be, I'm going to try and drop a couple into the show notes as well, so that people can take a look. So if they're looking at the episode just now online, they should be able to see a couple of pictures in there as well. You mentioned kind of going forward releasing the full system. I mean, where are you in terms of that kind of plan? I mean, is that towards kind of like the last quarter of this year? Have you got kind of any details you can share about that?
It's progressing. I I'll say my partner will say it's going really, really, really slow.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's actually it's going slowly. I mean, I am a person that is very much detail oriented, and Rick is even more so than I. So um, it's at the point now where the rules are done. It's the graphic
Mm-hmm.
artist that we're working with. He's out of Belgium, and our writer that writes the backstories for the miniatures and also the backstory for the world
Mm-hmm.
is lives in Germany. So those items are going. The rules themselves are done. The backstories are being written. The graphic arts part of it is where we're at right now with creating the character cards because each character has their own individual stats. So if you pick a dwarf, and there'll be, I believe we finally agreed that there's going to be 6 different dwarves that you'll be able to play in the party, and 6 of anything. It doesn't matter dwarf. So it'll be
I'm
6 of each faction.
thoroughly disappointed there's not 7 casts, I'll be honest with you.
Well, I
I
argued.
think
I wanted 5. He wanted 6. So we ended up agreeing with
I think you
6.
what 7 would have been the one, you know.
Oh, I'll keep that in mind next time and tell him. We got a request to have it 7, and
You
he'll
have to
probably
have
have a
just an extra one, you know.
he'll have
I
a
don't know.
coronary. So, um, he'll have a heart attack. Um, but so we have in any faction there'll be 6 different characters that you'll be able to play. There's 10
Mm-hmm.
different characters in the miniature collection that you'll be able to use for those 6 characters. So some of them have, like, if you want to use an archer, though you can use maybe a bowman or a crossbowman, and you can choose which one you want to use.
Mm.
But we're in the process, like I said, for the graphic artist developing the character cards and the art for the monster cards, and it just takes a while to do because we both want certain things, and he wants a little bit more detail. So that just takes a little bit more time. But being that there's more detail, it just gives the game that much appeal. So
Mm-hmm.
when you look, I got a picture today. The artist did our mountain ogre for a picture for one of the cards, and it blew me away what he did, and I was fine with that. I was like, Rick, if you want to go with that, that's awesome. He's like, nope, I want more detail. He's got to do this and this. I was like, all right. Well, I was happy with it, but
Mm.
um, things take time. So in reality, it looks like it'll be the last quarter of this year. End of October, November timeframe is when we're looking at it for the release of the game itself. And I can't wait to. We'll try to send you a copy so you can preview it and game test it and such.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'd love that. That would be yeah, that'd be cool. I do like, but I'll be putting in an extra dwarf. I'll tell you now, without a shadow of a doubt. If people want to kind of, keep themselves in the loop, you've mentioned obviously you guys are kind of on Instagram. Is the best place for them to go to the Tomb Guardians kind of Facebook page and keep an eye on Instagram and jump on the Twitter? Is that the best way to kind of keep an eye on everything that's going to be happening over the next couple of months for you guys?
For the initial releases, if you want to take a look at what's coming, yes, the easiest way is the social media. Our website, which is tombguardians.com. If the Amazons actually are all on our female Amazon faction, which is going to be another Kickstarter we're releasing, all the pictures are on our website currently that you can go and view them and see what the queen looks like and what the mage and the cleric, or there's a mage and a shaman, an older lady shaman.
Cool.
Or if you want to see what the archers are going to be, we have 2 different archers. We got a bow woman and a slinger. I decided to do a woman that has a sling, and then of course there's 4 female warriors. So you can go there and see those pictures. But the best way is to go to either our Facebook page at Tomb Guardians Miniatures or Instagram or Twitter and see the pieces that we're releasing. And we try to put a new piece out there every 3 to 5 days to show people what's coming. And we shown a lot of the Amazons recently. But the Amazon production, I decided to hold back and wait to release. One, because of production, but the other reason is I wanted to really get the terrain out there and let people get a look at the terrain and another aspect of our business that we're going to be releasing. So you get the terrain, you get the miniatures, and then you get at the end of the year, you get the rule set that tie everything together.
Cool. Excellent. Well, we'll make sure that everything goes in the show notes so people can keep an eye on you. If people want to keep an eye on us, they just need to go onto the Google, search for We're Not Wizards, and you'll find us on your Instagrams and your Facebooks and your Twitters and our website, which is we'renotwizards.com, our blog, which is we'renotwizards.blogspot.com. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on all these lovely podcast catcher places that all have either got pod or the word cast in them, except for Spotify, because it likes to be different. And if you like what you've listened along to tonight, then there's a couple of things you can do. Just tell somebody else. We spread like a horrific virus at a bus stop, so stand next to somebody else and sneeze "We're Not Wizards" all over them if you'd like to do that. And the second thing you can do is you can go to Apple Podcasts. You can drop us a rating, a subscription, or a review. If you are going to be giving us a review, remember, don't give us 10 stars because it makes us big-headed. But don't give us 1 star because it makes us cry. Give us something in the middle, like a 5, because it's average. And we are just a little bit average. But the person who's not been average tonight is rather fantastic, rather wonderful, Mr. Cass Suwinski. Thank you very, very much for coming on, sir.
Oh, I appreciate it. Anytime that you want to talk. I mean, I could talk hours about miniatures or the business or the company or just in general about gaming. I'm a fanatic. I love it. And I could talk hours. So I appreciate you having me. Awesome. Like I said, anytime you want to have me again and do this again, I've got no problem doing it. And if anybody has any questions, shoot us an email. They can shoot us an email, and that gets directly forwarded to me. Any questions about the business come to me, and I will answer you back within generally an hour. I'm on top
usually.
Of it.
Absolutely.
Usually. Unless my kids have sporting events, then that's a little different. My wife will shoot me if I'm working at their event.
I'm just replying to this email. You know.
Yeah, ballerina class, and I'm texting.
Exactly. That's not going to be a good thing. There are only 2 more things to do. The first thing is to remember that we're many things, but we're not wizards. Are we wizards, Cass?
Absolutely not.
That we're the missing 7th dwarf. That's what we are. Do you know what they say? Just remember that 6 out of 7 dwarfs aren't happy. And the next thing is to say goodbye. So it's a goodbye from Cass. Say goodbye, Cass.
Goodbye. Thank you again.
You're very, very welcome. And it's a goodbye from me. Remember, stay safe, roll 6s, make something awful, and keep an eye out on what Tomb Guardians are going to be doing next. But until the next time, goodbye.
A wizard is never late. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.